Hi, so here we are with the Mahler Special Collection at Western Archives, and it is COVID time, so we're all appropriately wearing our masks, but because my glasses fog, I'm going to be taking off my mask and then distancing as we go about looking at all the different materials. My name is Dr. Kate Helsen, and I'm at the Faculty of Music at Western, and the point of this video will be to talk about what a special collection is in an archive, and then secondly to give you instances or examples of lots of different kinds of materials. So I will be slightly more articulate with my mask off, and my glasses won't fog. And I'm joined today, and we're going to be having conversations as we go around these things with Tyler Makinen, and I will let him introduce himself.
I'm Tyler. I'm a Western student, and I've had a long time interest in Gustav Mahler in this collection. I'm going to take my mask off because my glasses keep fogging up. I wrote a paper about this collection a few years ago, contextualizing it among the other Mahler collections around the world. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about why it's here and how the materials got here and why it's important to us.
A little bit first about the special collection, what it is, and how it differentiates itself from just general stuff in the library. For one thing, it is if we want to define it, it is usually made up of rare documents, sometimes irreplaceable documents, and that means that maybe they're valued at a certain amount, and maybe they're just personal memorabilia that maybe wouldn't call a great fee on an auction block, but because of what they are in their context, they become invaluable. So we keep those in the special collection as well. Now, why are they here in an archive, and what makes them different from other books that you might find in the archive? Well, first of all, they're gathered together, they're often donated as a group to support not only the research in the university, but also the teaching. And so they're documents that show us our past in terms of the things that we find important to study or look at in various contexts. And as we go through the Mahler, you'll see how sometimes something would be very important for a composition student and something else would be very important for an art history student. And they're all together in this one collection, so they kind of help inform each other. The second reason I think that they are they're good to be in a university archive context is that they reflect the interests and the personalities, the histories of the people who are here in this university and populating it. This was brought from Europe mostly by Gustav Mahler's relatives, who were also very musically important, of course, but they tell the story of Mahler through their perspective, and that makes it about not only Mahler himself, who's obviously a great composer, but also then the family and the network and the context that spans 2 continents and an entire century, so that we can look at him from all of those different perspectives. And I wanted to say just a little bit about some of the other special collections in the archive so that you'd be able to put this in, just that this isn't the only thing that Western Archives has, obviously, although for musicologists this is definitely the shining star. There are others, this room, and there are special collections that are devoted to the geographical and cartography studies of Middlesex County and London. And lots of records about the establishment of the university, for example, and the history of southwestern Ontario just kind of generally. And there are a lot of books and a lot of donations to the special collections having to do with that will chronicle the establishment of particular businesses or things that have now kind of gained steam and become internationally famous. And then they're not just localized, they also will have to do with research interests of people at this university that are wider than that. So we have For example, a special collection is devoted to Walt Whitman. Why? Well, he spent some time in London, Ontario, and he's a poet. Not a Canadian poet, of course, an American poet, but he was here at the CPRI Institute, I think. And so we've got some stuff from him, and that is going to be interesting for poets and poetic scholars. And then we've also got, what else do we have? The Canadian Black History and Abolition special collections. We've got Canadian poetry. We've got some medieval manuscripts that you may or may not have seen us messing around with in other videos. We've got a mini books collection. So all sorts of things that appeal to the interests of the people who collected them and then donated them. Sometimes an archivist or a librarian will then buy things on auction as they come up for sale to complement the first donated collection. Usually that's how it goes. The large majority would be donated by a family of people who are passed away or whatever. Sometimes even you get tax receipts out of that sort of thing, but because they are of a value that you can think about in terms of money, and sometimes then things are bought to complement the collection. And I think that is all I have to say about what a special collection is and how it differentiates itself from the library in general. And I will hand it over to Tyler, who's going to talk about who Gustav Mahler was from the eyes of the people who are responsible for what we're going to see today.
So Mahler died at the turn of the 20th century, and he's super illustrious conductor. He conducted the Vienna State Opera, Vienna Phil, and then later he conducted the Metropolitan Opera. He was responsible for kind of raising the standards there and really building it up. He conducted the New York Philharmonic, and he was also kind of, as a composer, one of the last representatives of the kind of late Romantic era. He was kind of friends with Schoenberg and part of that whole transition. While he conducted the Vienna State Opera and the Vienna Phil, Arnold Rose was the concertmaster at that time, and Arnold Rose ended up marrying Mahler's sister, Justine. And they had two children, Alma and Alfred, and this collection is the Mahler-Rose collection because eventually it was kind of through these family connections that it ended up here. So during the Second World War, Alfred and his wife ended up fleeing to America, and they brought with them a large trunk full of things that Justine had given them for safekeeping, and in this trunk was a huge amount of memorabilia that she had collected. This was Mahler's sister collecting all this stuff from her brother, whether it was kind of letters from famous people or Mahler's manuscripts or whatever. And then Alfred, who was Mahler's nephew, ended up being on the string faculty here and running an opera workshop, and then donated the materials to the collection here. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about Mahler and himself, and about the Rosés and this collection and how it came to be here, and about why it's important and interesting. Mahler was a very, very illustrious conductor during his lifetime. He conducted the Vienna State Opera, the Vienna Philharmonic, and then later he came across the Atlantic and conducted the Metropolitan Opera Orchestra as well as the New York Phil. He's also known as one of the last representatives of the late Romantic composers. He was friends with composers like Webern and Schoenberg, and kind of was part of that transition into modernism. I'm going to take off Mahler's mask so that you can get a better look at him. This bust was done by Auguste Rodin a few years before Mahler died. So while Mahler conducted the Vienna State Opera and the Vienna Phil, Arnold Rose was the concertmaster of both orchestras, and Arnold Rose ended up marrying Mahler's older sister, Justine, and they had two children. So Mahler's niece and nephew were Alma Rose and Alfred Rose. Alma Rose ended up in Auschwitz in 1944, and she was also a violinist, and she conducted and led an orchestra of female prisoners there, and they played kind of for their lives, and she ended up dying in Auschwitz, probably of food poisoning. There's a movie about her called Playing for Time, and there are a few books about her. And then her brother Alfred made it out of Europe. Him and his wife came to North America in 1938, and they came with a trunk of things from Justine, Mahler's sister, their mother. And Justine had collected lots of Mahler's, just objects of interest having to do with Mahler and his correspondence. She collected a lot of letters from celebrities like Richard Strauss and Arnold Schoenberg, as well as kind of, cutlery and batons and photographs and whatnot. And then Alfred Rose, this is Mahler's nephew, eventually ended up on the music faculty at Western, running an opera workshop and teaching strings. And that's how this collection came here, was through that connection. This collection is super, super important because it's one of the most complete collections of Mahler's artifacts and letters and whatnot, especially from his early life. Henry Louis Lagrange talks about it, or has written about it as being very, very important, and he used it in writing his monumental biography of Mahler. There are collections elsewhere of Mahler's things as well, in Europe and in the Americas. A lot of his kind of manuscripts and whatnot are in private collections, but there's also a lot of kind of artwork and things that are in places like the Belvedere and in museums in Finland that just happen to be there because of Mahler's travels as a conductor.
Okay, so I'm going to round out this portion of it by just talking about for whom this collection would be interesting or a good idea. I kind of think there are three types of people who would come to see or request certain things out of the Mahler collection. The first of those, obviously, are Mahler scholars, or people who are interested in his work, in the time that he wrote it, and possibly things like the transatlantic connection, that kind of thing. The second type of person, I think, that might be drawn to a collection like this is somebody who was wanting to look at how art, or how we remember famous composers or art makers of all sorts, in a political context, because of the story of his nephew crossing the ocean after the Second World War, because of Alma Rose and her, she was a violinist all over Europe and then dying in Auschwitz. That the impact of the politics and the particular situation, the context, for all of these artifacts that we still have, renders them a little bit more human and a little bit more relatable, in a way that maybe when I would just stand up and lecture about Mahler and the great symphonies or whatever, that would be, it would maintain a kind of distance that I think this kind of stuff breaks a little bit. We're going to look at personal letters. We're going to look at artifacts, material culture type stuff, cookbooks, first drafts of musical compositions. All those sorts of things make him make Mahler into someone who we inherit the idea of art from, in a context about 100 years ago now, that is still relatable to us when we can actually hold it in our hands. So that brings me to the third group of people, and that is students. I think that archives and special collections within archives that are in universities have a third role. Of course, there are going to be special collections in places that are not connected to houses of learning, but this is, and the reason is that students are therefore ushered into that role as inheritors. We can encounter this stuff, and we get to choose what it means to us, and we get to read it in ways that can be relevant and can teach us stuff, and our role as students, and roles even as students when we're professors or whatever, we're encountering things that are going to help us learn, and that's what I think the third group of people that are welcomed into this kind of circle. We find out a little bit more about how we're human in relation to other humans that we may not have known personally, but we can hold their letters. So that's, I think, about all of that. We do have a few items that are going to be a little strange, but as we go, we'll take them in kind of subjects, and so you'll see some music, some various drafts of things, and secondly, you'll see some concert programs. You'll see a pay list for a group of musicians. You'll see program notes, that sort of thing. So that's in the area that you might expect to find in the special collections. Then we're going to move to the more personal things like letters, both written by Mahler himself and then written to either Mahler or his or Arnold Rose by composers that you may have heard of: Richard Strauss, Schoenberg, even Furtwängler, the conductor, writes a letter, not to Mahler, obviously. So we'll look at those. And then we're going to look a little bit more personal. We're going to get into photographs. We're going to get into the personal memorabilia, and then things like cookbooks, things like pressed flowers. They bring us closer still to the life of this family, and then to Mahler as the one that draws the attention first. So we will start with the most expected stuff to be in a special collections. And that is first prints, first editions, stuff that you might think, oh, well, that's the original print. So go back to that to verify your particular edition that you have at home. And these are lovely little things. This is a collection of songs, and it was printed in 1897 in Leipzig. And so here we have, and of course it's got a stamp on it that says Alfred E. Rose. So it was in his collection of his uncle. But inside it is, of course, a print. So it's an old print, but you could definitely read it, definitely perform from it, were you to be so lucky. Here's another one. This is the first violin part of the 8th Symphony. And I don't have a publication date on this, but it does look like it's been in a stylized copyist's hand. So this is very common for the turn of the 20th century. Like it is so stylized and so clear that it would have been perfectly legitimate as a publication. We wouldn't talk about this as a manuscript per se, but you can see that there have been all sorts of things added with the copyist pen, and irregular shapings of flat signs and things like that. But generally speaking, this would have been something used for an orchestra. Now, getting slightly more into stuff that you might not come across even in old library collections, this is the second movement of Mahler's First Symphony, a bit of it, and it looks like it's what's called a fair copy, which means that a manuscript that Mahler gave to someone who worked as a professional copyist, and then would be given back this in order to work further on, or maybe even rehearse some of it. That is not something that you're going to find sitting around, even in the rare books. This is now we're into the more special stuff.
So here we have an early work by Mahler, and this is copied out by Alfred Rose, Mahler's nephew. And this is by a piano quartet that Mahler wrote when he was young, kind of a student work. And we've got a little note with it from Mahler's preeminent biographer, de Lagrange, and he calls the writing too learned and self-conscious. So here we're getting deeper into the kind of rare, mysterious contents of archives. This is a copy of the scherzo from Mahler's Fourth Symphony, and it looks like it's in Mahler's hand. And we've got kind of pencil scribbles all over, so it looks like, possibly conducting markings or something like that. He's got underline the solo part, rehearsal markings. And here we've got another bit of Mahler's Fourth Symphony, the Scherzo, the same one as we just looked at. And this is also in Mahler's hand, and this is just the first little bit of the solo violin part.
Next over here, we have something that is also part of archives. It's not a manuscript. It's also not a publication. It's a weird hybrid of those. It's a copy, so photocopies actually, of a handwritten instance of a piece. This happens to be from Kindertotenlieder, which is very famous, of course, as one of Mahler's big works that gets done all the time. But here you can see, so it's important to have in a special collection like this because it gives us a lot more instances of manuscript and what he might have meant in particular situations. It's not an edition, it hasn't been kind of flattened out and standardized like that. And yet, it isn't the real thing with the real ink. And it serves a purpose in special collections and archives, this kind of thing that I think is often not really appreciated. It might be underrated. I wrote the majority of my PhD on a 12th century manuscript that I had copies like this of. And then, you know, at the end of it, when you have questions specific to this physical thing, then of course you're going to go and consult the actual thing in the library where it is. But up until that point, you can work off of good, true, clear copies very well, and it is the stakes are not quite as high in case something goes wrong or you sneeze or it falls off the table. So that's that. The Klagende Lied, which a lot of people will also be familiar with if you're a musician, this is an instance here of a folder, and the German says, the componist is Gustav Mahler, obviously, and Eigentum, that means the who owns it, and that's Alfred Rose. So again, you see this connection between Mahler and those who are getting his stuff. This is a manuscript version of the solo voice, as it says here. And it actually says, this is the first ungedruckte Teil. So that means not printed, das Klagende Lied. So here is not printed, the ungedruckte. And here we have the soprano part for the Klagende Lied. That might be interesting for singers because typically speaking now, when you get a solo part, it doesn't just look like an orchestral part without any other kind of context. Usually you have some kind of piano reduction or something under it, and that's not the way that it used to be. And we can find that out here. This is the bass solo, done the same way. So no piano reduction, no harmonic indications, no lead-ins from instruments to help you on your way. And then we have the tenor part here, soprano solo again, and all of this says alle Rechte bei Alfred Rose Wien, and that means all rights belong to Alfred Rose Vienna. So we've just seen the copy of the manuscript of Klagende Lied, and now let's see how it progresses. We happen to have here the next thing, a fair copy of Klagende Lied. It says Partitur here, and as you can see, this is kind of the orchestral score. It's got all of the parts here, and it's also got conducting markings in blue conducting pencil, and also some in red conducting pencil here. So now we're seeing it take shape. It's still handwritten, but this wouldn't have been in Mahler's hand. This would have been in a copyist's hand. And then we come to the print of the same. And so now you can see that everything has been standardized. This is a print as though an edition, as you're used to encountering them. And if we wanted to, we could probably compare one page to one page all the way along, from manuscript to fair copy to edition. All for Klagen to lead here. And then I will hand it over to Tyler.
Here we've got two folders, and they have kind of copies of materials of kind of drafting materials for Mahler's 10th Symphony. So in here we've got, this is in Mahler's hand, and we have kind of bracketed sections, we've got crossed out sections, we have kind of further in, we have just little scraps and sketches of things, and this is just working materials. Nobody was playing from this stuff. And this is just a folio with more of the same materials in it. Very, very sparse.
And of course, this is his unfinished symphony.
Oh yeah, that's right. So really, like, this is kind of as good as it gets for this symphony. Everything after it's not like you made edits later, because this was never performed even. Mm-hmm. Fun stuff. Here we have a whole bunch of memorabilia. We've got some pictures from, these pictures are all featuring Mahler-Rose, Mahler's brother-in-law, concertmaster in Vienna. And here we've got a lovely picture of Mahler and his sister Justine wearing hats, looking very dapper. Mahler would have been about just over 30 years old there. And here we have a wedding announcement declaring the soon-to-be couple Gustav Mahler and Alma Schindler, soon-to-be Alma Mahler. And Alma was kind of a socialite, so she had affairs with lots of artists and poets and people of the day, but Mahler is her most famous relationship.
So this says Zahlungsbogen, which means that it's an accounting. Counting Zahlen is to count. So this is an accounting sheet for the year of 1905, 1906, 1907. And it is from the Hofoperntheater in Vienna. This is income. So we have the personal income and numbers here, and then we have taxes that they were supposed to pay on that, and then they have land taxes, the next sheet over, and then Kommunalbeitrage, that's the social tax that was also then going to be incurred on top of those original numbers. And all the way down you see that, and then they say after all of these have been taken off, what the Restbezug, that is what's remaining. So that's that ledger sheet, and it's you can open it. It's a bifolio, as you can see. And presumably inside of this would have been receipts and other kinds of individual documentations that they would then put together into a ledger like that. Another thing that is, again, written material about concertizing and stuff. This is in Justine Mahler's hand, and it is a copy, presumably for someone who's about to make a program, for Mahler's Second Symphony. Famously what they call the Resurrection Symphony. It has a bit of a program to it that is a story that you tell yourself in your head when you listen to it. Not necessarily prescriptive, but it is supposed to evoke certain things, and so that's why you would write out a little bit of help for the people who are encountering the symphony. And of course, it's not, at this point, people are still reading as they're listening in concert halls, and concerts are not quite, well, they're formal occasions, but they also are social enough that this kind of background and this kind of personalization is going to help the people coming to hear the concert. So here you can see that she's actually kind of diagrammed it out so that you have the first movement, erste Satz, here she has underlined. Then she hasn't underlined zweite Satz and dritte Satz, but she has underlined vierte Satz. And then after each of these comes the tempo marking for it. So the zweite Satz, the second movement, is the andante. And then she says, for a small blink of an eye, für einen kleinen Augenblick wird dann das her handwriting is horrible. So something happens for an Augenblick. If I were encountering this in an archive and I was thinking that my German was good enough, and then I realized that I was never in the world going to be able to crack this handwriting, someone else with a specialization in paleography for this time in German will have given some kind of, again, fair copy of this. So the first thing I would do is try to figure out whether I could match the words, even if I had to skip a couple, with a printed edition wherever this went to a printer or another scribe. Moving on, I'd like to show you a few concert programs and advertisements for concerts and concert series. So these are, again, mostly from the collection either of Arnold or Mahler himself wouldn't really have kept these things, but he would expect the entourage around him to have collected them, mostly Justine, actually, because of being the older sister and also not being married for the amount of time that she lived with Mahler and collected his stuff up until she got married to Arnold, that she would have been the kind of main secretary, if you will. So here we have, well, let's do this in chronological order here first. We've got a program from a concert that Gustav Mahler conducted on the 18th of February, 1900 at exactly 12:30 in the afternoon. Präzise 12:30. That's what it says here. And the program is, not surprisingly, because of the time, Beethoven's Ninth. It's because this was, Beethoven's Ninth, the star of Beethoven's Ninth was definitely rising around this time. That is not something that a lot of people know, that Beethoven's Ninth really didn't catch fire until maybe a generation or two after Beethoven was dead. But by this time, Mahler and everybody else wanted their mitts on it and was performing it lots and lots. Sometimes there would be concerts where it was performed twice in one concert.
Mahler even went so far as to introduce revisions to the orchestration.
Right, yes.
To make it heavier.
Mahler did that, and of course Wagner, more famously, did that, I think, but maybe people don't know. Mahler doubled a lot of the wind instruments and things like that too, and then he, of course, Wagner said that he was doing this because that's what Beethoven would have done. I don't know whether Mahler was quite that arrogant. Anyway, so this is a program of one such concert, and this is a program that includes the top. It's almost like an advertisement. This is a 5-concert series. Femtus, a Bondemalt is the French grab in German of a word that means a series, like you have to buy for the whole series in a Bondemalt. And it is from Sunday the 14th of January 1900, so this is a little bit earlier. Again, we have Mittags, Präzise, 12:30. So they're very specific about this. On this program, the one of 5, we have a Schumann symphony in D minor, number 4, and then we have a Mahler
Gesänge für einstimmige mit Orchesterbegleitung vorgetragen von Fräulein Selma Kurz. So this is the soloist for this set of songs that Mahler wrote. And it is Lieder eines fahrendes Gesellen, so that's something that we encounter today, as well as stuff out of Des Knaben Wunderhorn, which is also very, very well known today. And then we have, the last of this program is a Berlioz overture from Carnaval Romain. And on the back of this program are the words for the songs that would have been sung by our friend Selma, so that everyone could follow along. Okay, this last one is also interesting. It's from 1907, the 24th of November. This is printed by or hosted by something called the Gesellschaft Musikfreunde in Wien. So this would have been a consortium of people who were funding these concerts in Vienna. And it is a concert of Gustav Mahler's Second Symphony in C minor. And it gives us the program as it shows us the different movements. And then between 3 and 5, there's Urlicht from Des Knaben Wunderhorn, and then back to the finale of the symphony. Not something that we do very often nowadays, breaking up symphonies by referencing other works by the composer, but that's what happened then. And then down here, we've got the names of all of the singers involved in this performance. So it's, and they are all from the Hofoper, so the court opera in Vienna. And it says here at the bottom, this is kind of nice, Dirigent, so the conductor is, der Komponist. So the director is the composer. This gets us into lots of discussions about intent and about the role of a conductor as interpreter, and what happens when the conductor is also the composer, and what happens when the conductor is not a composer at all and is simply an interpreter, and then when they develop, for example, specialties. So the last of these that people might know, composed in a great kind of range of these, is Leonard Bernstein, of course. So if Leonard Bernstein makes a recording of something Leonard Bernstein wrote, nobody's going to question it. But if Leonard Bernstein interprets Mahler's 10th in a particular way, then people are going to say, oh, well, what kinds of things did he bring to this as a composer or as opposed to a conductor? Another conversation, different day. So on this side of the table, now we're getting into the very personal. We're getting into letters. First, we're going to look at some letters written by Mahler to the various people that you're starting to know, like Justine, his sister, and all sorts of characters. And then we're going to move down the table into others that are also now famous, writing to either Mahler or Arnold or one of those. And of course, they also bring with them then the culture of the time. So I'm going to start with this one. I love it. 1897. It's a postcard, and you'll be able to see here that this is a nice drawing of Venice, two of the main famous squares in Venice, and that's the Bridge of Sighs over there. And then, of course, you have the Ducal Palace right there. And a little bit of chicken scratch by Gustav to his sister on the front, which I am not going to attempt to read. But what I love is the back, because he has addressed this to Signorina Giustina Malorina, which is an Italianization of Justine Mahler, of course. So I think that's great. And 1897 would have put him at 36, 37 years old, hitting his stride, obviously, going places and seeing things, but he's still writing to his sister. Next, we have a curiosity. It's not dated, but it's on stationery that's from the Hofoperntheater, where he was conductor. Gustav Mahler was conductor. And this is a doodle that he did. I'm not going to speculate as to what it is, what it's supposed to be, but I love this kind of stuff because it's not only just fun and proves that, you know, geniuses of orchestral composition also make crazy doodles, but it situates him in a place and a time on a stationery, and whatever this is can remain a mystery. That's, to me, not the most important thing. Then here we have another photocopied letter, and again this is just on paper, on regular paper. It's a photocopy, but it is a letter from Gustav to Justine dated 1901. And again, when we encounter stuff like this in special collections, we love it because then we can do things like copy it out or take pictures of it, and it's less vulnerable, and yet we still have a good example of Mahler's handwriting and of course what it actually says at the time. Here, this is from the Palast Hotel in Berlin. So the stationery also helps locate it in time. Now we're going to get into letters from others to Mahler and then to Mahler's family. This is the first one of these, and it's dated May 1901. And it is to Mahler from Cosima Wagner, who is Liszt's daughter and famously Wagner's wife. And Cosima would be at this point pushing 70 years old, and this is her handwriting, and on paper that is now 120 years old, with her lovely signature there at the bottom. And this says, "Mein lieben hochgesehnter Herr Direktor." So, dear, highly esteemed Mr. Director. Herzlichen Dank für Ihr Schreiben und für die Beiligung Ihnen heutigen Gesängen. And then it goes on, such a thank you very much for your writing and for the conversation, and for the meaningful things in that conversation. That's kind of how it could translate. And then she says, I'm still not totally clear on one thing, and then it goes on. So this is obviously picking up from a conversation. Who knows when?
They knew each other because Mahler was doing a really good job conducting Wagner's works all over the place. Mm-hmm. And so she, after Richard Wagner died, Cosima was trying to run the festival, and so she was trying to engage Mahler to conduct there, basically. And he was so good that she kind of turned a blind eye to his Jewish background. Mm-hmm. And so that's probably where that comes from.
Yeah, cool.
It springs out of that.
This is a letter from Johann Strauss Jr, so the Waltz King, to Gustav Mahler in, does it have a date on it? It says the 1st of March. Well, that's helpful. The archive here has said it's from 1894. So, and this, again, it's that script of the time. It begins, thank you very much for the first part of something and restoring it to whole. Who knows? That's his signature there at the bottom, which most people will gravitate towards. And the date comes over here at the bottom, so at the top. Oh, it says 11 March. Excuse me, those are both ones. 11 March.
So here we have a whole bunch of letters from Max Reger to Arnold Rose. The Rose Quartet was championing a lot of works by contemporary composers, and I guess they were playing Max Reger's string quartets, and so Max Reger sends a series of letters here inquiring about rehearsal details and dates and whatnot, and you can see kind of Reger's very characteristic writing, full of kind of underlines and bold strokes, for which he was known, and exclamation marks. And here we have a letter from Arnold Schoenberg to Arnold Rose. Like I just said, the Rose Quartet was championing a lot of contemporary works, and part of this might have been Gustav Mahler's doing. Him and Schoenberg grew to respect one another quite a bit, and Mahler would make a point of kind of going to Schoenberg's premieres and clapping when the rest of the audience was booing, and kind of likewise Schoenberg would do the same thing for him. And here we've got a letter from Schoenberg to Arnold Rose expressing his gratitude for the Rose Quartet working on some of his music. And at the top, Schoenberg wrote a tone row to express his gratitude, saying that words could not convey how thankful he was to the Rose Quartet. Here's another example of the kind of people that the Roses were rubbing shoulders with. This is a letter. This is a copy of a letter from Furtwängler to Arnold Rose. And here, moving out of letters, we've got envelopes. Just an envelope and kind of a note. This is from Alma Rose to Alfred Rose and Maria Rose, who was Alfred's wife, and she was sending this in 1938 to them as they embarked for America, and she sent it from Vienna. She stayed behind, and then in near the end of the Second World War, she ended up in Auschwitz. But here we have her seeing them off, and you can see kind of stamps and whatnot.
So now here in the special collections, we start getting into material objects, or the material culture part of the special collections. I'm going to talk first a little bit about the elephant in the room, or the Rodin in the room, commissioned by someone who was in the environs of Mahler, but not a musician himself of any great renown. And it was made by Auguste Rodin in Paris in 1909, when Alma and Gustav were on their way back from New York to Vienna. They spent the latter half of April of that year, 1909, in Paris, and Mahler sat for Rodin several times, and Alma actually writes a little bit about this in her memoirs later on, about the way this was constructed, for example, which was that Rodin would take a block, and then instead of cutting away, he would roll up little bits of clay and add to the block to get the sculpture, as opposed to taking away. And she said she'd never seen that before. So there are actually several copies of this in the world. And it also, this cast of this head is also found on a very famous sculpture that is still in Paris, the gates in the garden of the hotel. It used to be a hotel. Now it's the Musée Rodin in Paris, and that's where this was, where he sat for this. Rainer Maria Rilke was living on the first floor, and this was being done on the second floor in 1909. Then we have some silverware, which I will unbox for you here in good 21st century tradition. This was in the trunk that came over, and is part of, therefore, the collection. And it's all, it is of a set, and it has M as the nice imprinted initial on all of these things, including, so this is the soup spoon here, of course. Get this in the right way. And then we have these little teeny tiny spoons as well, also with M on the back, and they would of course go here for the little, it's for salt here. So you must imagine that all of these people we know so well from letters and photography and everything else, not to mention their musical works, would have been having dessert with one of these spoons right here. This was an interesting piece for me to see, because the last time I was in with this collection, it didn't come out. Somehow it was stuck in the back of the archives. So this is nice. This is just a decorative bowl given to the Mahlers. The amount of detailing on this is again, it gives you part of the sense of the times that they lived in and the aesthetics and what would have been on the table at meals. Getting back to more musical things, here we have a reel-to-reel and audio cassette tapes of performance by Arnold Rose, and so here we've got a little bit of evidence of that sort of thing. We can pop that into the various machines that can still read that and see them at work. And then finally, we have labeled in this baton case, thin batons, Richard Strauss and Alfred Rose. Heavy one, Gustav Mahler. And on this baton, it actually says, from Gustav Mahler benutzt, so used by Gustav Mahler, written in ink here. So there is a conducting baton of our friend. This conducting baton doesn't have such writing as that. It's got the maker of the baton on it. It's a Olsen model, it says here, and it's obviously also been used. It's worn on the handle part. And then there's a whole bunch of rehearsal batons here, one of which is snapped at the tip. Tenors. So yeah, exactly, brass. Yeah. So again, we can. This is kind of the relics of the culture that holds these things in esteem.
So, at long, kind of save the best for last, among the kind of cooler things you can find in special collections are cookbooks. So we have a couple handwritten cookbooks here that ended up in the Rose family. You can see some of these are, this one probably belonged to Justine Mahler. And it's all handwritten here, and there are indexes, or not indexes here, but, and this is a copy that she made for Alma, her daughter, who could have been as a wedding gift when Alma got married, and comes with an index of recipes alphabetically, and this one's got some neat things in it besides recipes. It's got some nice artwork done by children in crayon. And actually, this one might be the one by Justine. We're not sure which is which. One of them is a copy, one of them was Justine's. This one might actually have been Justine's, because at one point, Gustav Mahler developed a kind of a sensitive stomach. He's having gastro issues. And so in this cookbook, a whole bunch of the recipes are crossed out, and they tend to be very kind of heavy or acidic foods. And they're just aggressively slashed out in pencil crayon here.
And then, once you're finished eating, we have what was done back in the day, especially for people who were famous for one reason or another, a lock of hair. This is a lock of Gustav Mahler's hair. taken at the time of his death, presumably, or perhaps before as a memento. Justine might have taken it. This says, Locken von Gustav Mahler, here. And it is an old envelope, so this hair would have been in this envelope. And here is the hair itself. And it's in a plastic folder now, not coming out. And it's been bound by a little bit of red thread there. So here is Mahler, as close as we can get. And finally, we've got some personal mementos that really aren't explained in the writings that the researchers have done to supplement and fill out our understanding of this collection. They are kept in this envelope here. And the envelope on the outside says Edelweiss Gustav Mahler. And inside here we have the pressed flower. And beside it is a starfish. Let's see the other side of it. And we don't know what the story is, but we know it was special enough to be kept for 100 years odd. Over 100 years, I guess now. And this is the kind of thing that I think reminds us maybe most powerfully about what it means to be inheritors of all of this. That we don't necessarily need to know the story or the answer, and that maybe there isn't one correct one, but that these things, by virtue of meaning something, that they can then take on meaning for us. So here we have, symphonic sketches and busts by Rodin and starfish. So I think I wanted to end it this way in order to give you a sense of the gamut, the sort of breadth that a special collection can have in it, and also the way it can connect us to the people that we cannot meet and never see, but that have a kind of a life then within the people who encounter this stuff, and we inherit it, and we're the guardians of it. We're the ones that are going to decide whether it has meaning for the next generation. So in whatever capacity we do that, whether we're musicians or musicologists or historians or simply interested people in the cultural landscape, we get to encounter this stuff that transcends our lives and our time, and makes meaningful connections across all of those things. So I think that's all for that. Thank you.